diplomat, and then tomorrow is...
Okay, finally, what does Dr. Baofu, with his many studies and many theories and many books, think about the major topic, geopolitical question today, the US and China in the 21st century? But please go whichever way you like in your presentation.
Okay. Before I go into that, I just want to make a short response to your previous comment before the break. You talk about that we need to, that your interest is to look into the world from the scientific perspective, not the religious one, because now we are in the modern era. Now, in my book, The Future of Human Civilization, and also in many other books on science, I question that too. I think that it's very dangerous to look at the world only from the scientific perspective. And this is what I call the ideology of scientism. And that is, I think, very damaging. We also need to look at the world from the non-scientific perspectives, but that is a bad name nowadays. Science is a good word, like they are the new God of modern times. And religion, they are dogmatic, they are superstitious, they are not supposed to be. I question that too.
So is religion non-scientific, or it doesn't necessarily follow?
I do think that there are some fundamental conflicts between science and religion, but I also think that there are some commonalities too. But I think that it's much better for humans, and also in the future, especially for post-humans, they're able to transcend that. Instead of the, let's say, creation, evolution controversy, in a way, I think that that controversy is very laughable. It's very mistaken. I think that we can use both of them to understand the world, but in a different ways. But the post-human knowledge that I'm proposing is to transcend this kind of dialogue, this kind of like dichotomy, religious versus scientific, or something, sacred versus circular. I think that that's very damaging. This is one of the ideology of modern time. Modernity, by the way, is in my book, I question that, I deconstruct that, and say that that is also very questionable too. Now, having said that, let's go back to China and the US that you just mentioned.
Yeah,
now, one of the major concerns nowadays, not just in the US, but also in East Asia and Southeast Asia, is about the rise of China. It's not just about the question of South China Sea, about all these islands. It's not just a question about the US presence in Asia and the security alliances. I think that there is a remaking of world order in the process. And it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable because they get used to the American era, where the US has been dominant in the world, not just in East Asia. So now the question is, what do people do with China? In the case of Philippines, as you know, your previous president, he was very anti-Chinese.
That's right.
Yeah, and now the new one is much more collaborating. I don't want to go into the internal politics of the Philippines, but I just want to talk about international politics. I think that the countries in Southeast Asia and also East Asia, no matter what their previous history and concerns, I think they have to recognize that we are entering a new era, and stop thinking of the old way. And start thinking that, like it or not, China will be the dominant power, not just in East Asia and Southeast Asia, but also in the world. And they are not ready for that. They get used to the American one, but I think that they have to look into a new reality. You have to deal with the new guard, the change of the guard, whether you like it or not, but that's for your own security, for your own survival. You have to find some way to deal with it instead of siding with someone else and trying to can balance. That is, I think, it's not that.
You use the term new era, and that is exactly the term that President Xi Jinping in his speech at the 19th CPC National Congress used, the new era. There's a new era now in the world, and there's this is created by the new major power relations that China is championing, which is based on the new international dictum, which he does not describe that way. I'm describing it that way, which is win-win. Because from the Treaty of Westphalia down, the principle in foreign relations has been no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. The new win-win formula of President Xi Jinping and China is there are permanent friends. You and I, every nation are permanent friends. We're only, and this again is a term used by Xi Jinping, we're in one planet, you know? So we're permanent friends. We're permanently non-enemies. We should be not enemies. You know? And all our interests must come together for now finally, this very important phrase from President Xi Jinping, so that we achieve the community of common destiny, which is sometimes termed as community of shared destiny, shared future. In other words, China today, of course, China qualifies all this in saying that our system, socialism with Chinese characteristics, have been proven to lift 700 million people out of poverty. We offer this to the world, but we will not export it. In other words, this is not going to be like the US, American exceptionalism, exporting its values, its democracy, insisting that this is the only system, and in fact written about by Francis Fukuyama, which has, of course, been proven false. You know? So I think that is what China is saying, and I have described this. They do not describe it, but this is the international. That was the ideal from the socialist and communist movement of several centuries back. This is the international of the human community. It is a message that has not been understood by the rest of the world yet, but I hope, I'm in fact advocating it for 2018 as my mission to make people understand. But what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I have written many books and articles about this kind of issue. And one of them is the one that I just mentioned, Beyond the World of Titans, for example.
Beyond the world of
Titans and the
Titans,
the remaking of world order. Now, my vision and my approach is different from yours, I think, and also different from theirs. There are two things over here that you just mentioned. One ideology is what I call realism in international affairs.
Realism?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a question of national interest. It's no permanent friends, no permanent enemies and all that. Henry Kissinger, for example, was an advocate about that. I disagree with that too. Now, on the other side, there's what I call the idealism in international affairs. There's the other ideology, the win-win, this kind of relationship.
That's right. Yeah.
We can be friends, that is a form of idealism in international affairs. I also disagree with that. My proposal is to transcend that, is to go beyond that. Now, there are some practical implications on both sides. That's why my case is that I don't side with either side.
Okay, what is beyond that? What is beyond that?
Okay, for example, let's give you one example. You just talk about, let's say, Fukuyama and some other people. This is exactly why the U.S. invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. And by the way, Fukuyama was one of the founders to sign the charter, the neoconservative movement, and which is to advocate regime change. That insofar as the change for the political system, for the democratic one, it justified the U.S. to invade other countries to change. Right, yeah, and the consequences in Iraq and Afghanistan are so bad to U.S. national security. Now, even Fukuyama himself is withdrawing from that kind of support. Now, that is the implication of what I just said, is that to go beyond that. Why should we go beyond that? Because of this kind of realism, in a way. This is also mixed with a form of idealism again.
Yeah, but
because of the ideology
isn't going beyond that is the win-win formula.
Okay, fine. But the win-win is also a bit problematic because in real life, it's not so harmonic as you might think. Even a wife and a husband, sometimes they fight.
But isn't that the purpose? Isn't that the function of the human mind and spirit? To reason things out until it is resolved and a synthesis is achieved.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Just give you an idea, just a metaphor here, because we're in the East now. We're in the Philippines. In the East, let's say in China, in East Asia, they think about just a yin-yang.
Precisely.
A metaphor. Now, if there is win, there's also lose. So you cannot always just say win-win. Win-win is just another form of ideology. We have to also understand in some cases, it's not win-win, it's also win-lose. So my proposal in the end is neither with the idealism nor with realism in the end. I think that both of them can be quite damaging to human security in the longer term. We have to think outside the box, not just the two boxes.
So what can replace win-win that is beneficial for all?
Well, I also think that the win-win can be beneficial in certain cases. For example, what China is doing. Let me give you one example about the win-win, for example. Now, several hundred years ago, the rise of the West is based on colonialism. The West, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and then the French, the German, and the American, and the Russian, and the Japanese, and all that, they colonized other countries. They committed tremendous atrocity, massacres, exploitation, slaves, and rape, and all that. And now we are entering the neo-colonial too. Now, the Chinese case is different in a sense because instead of colonizing, enslaving, we talk about new slavery or colony, they do not do that. In fact, they engage in a new form of mercantilism such that they can, grow much more rapidly, but at the same time, they help other countries.
Precisely,
Let's say I was in Africa, for example. I have been there for 2 years now. Everywhere I went, people thought that I am a Chinese. And they tell me a lot of, they look up to the Chinese model because China has been helping them to build roads, bridges, clinics, stadiums. The headquarters of the African Union was built by China for free. And many of the roads, bridges, ports, and educational system, many of them now, they are built by China. And many of them, by the way, are free. Or they borrow money from China, but then in the end, they always ask for that cancellation at the end. So in the end, in a way, that's also free too. So, and they like it because they benefit them. Now, the Chinese did not come and colonize them. This is my colony, or I enslave you, I rape you, or something like the massacre and atrocity and all that. So that is a win-win situation in some cases now, but it's not asymmetric.
That's right.
Because you still have the bigger guy and the small one.
Well,
so in a way, I also agree with you that the win-win, you say, can win-win benefit? Yes, it's also benefit, but there are also other cases where they do not see each other eye to eye.
Because the way I see it, first we must have win-win among all humanity. Then we will try to use humanity's capacity to win together against the natural forces that threaten the Earth. If there is a new global cooling or a new global warming, if there is an asteroid threatening to crash into Earth and demolish half of humanity, the humanity works together to overcome the natural challenges. So, well, anyway, we don't have time to finish this. But it's very interesting.
But a good example is that there are also other cases which are win-lose. North Korea is a good example. The rivalry between the U.S. and China from a scholarly perspective is another example. But that's also the other side which is win-win. And that's why you have this kind of problem in North Korea, even between China and North Korea. In the U.S., for example, people used to think that China can pressure North Korea, they can use the leverage, and I disagree with that because I think there are some also fundamental differences between North Korea and China to sum up the rivalry between the U.S.
We have only 1 minute left. Obviously, we cannot finish all this discussion,
understand.
But I think the next 50 seconds should be your message to us and to the world, and then maybe my invitation for you to be back for further discussions. But what's your message?
I don't like to advocate and tell other people what to do. I don't like that because every time people think that I'm from the U.S., they think that then I shall come and tell you, do this, and do this. I do not do that. I do think that East Asia and Southeast Asia, in this case, they can learn from others. I think that maybe in the next few decades, whether they like it or not, they will have to confront China. They have to deal with that. I do not think that it's necessarily a win-lose as they are afraid of, but I don't think that it's necessarily a win-win as they may be told, but I think that they have to maneuver between the two. But I certainly disagree with those people who think that, for example, that is a threat. I think that just like the crisis in Chinese, opportunity and also
risk.
And risk. So I think they have to deal with that instead of thinking that as like something that is like we have to contain, but on the other hand, also do not think that there must be something that we have to accommodate. But I think that we have to deal together with them such that can benefit them. But remember, even in a marriage, wife and husband can fight. So it's not very unnatural, but it's just a beginning. Another prediction of mine, which maybe I can send a message to them, is that sooner or later, East Asia and Southeast Asia will try to come to adjust with the new guard. When you have a new kid in the block, people don't like him. they try to do, because he's such a new guy.
Yeah.
When the new kid becomes the old one, now he's the new guy.
Okay.
Now you have to adjust. I think that this will come too.
Okay, well, we don't have time anymore. Thank you very much, Dr. Baofu. And we hope you pass by the Philippines again in your next world tour. Okay, maraming salamat. That's thank you in Tagalog.
Thank you.
And have a good weekend pondering these issues from Dr. Baofu.